Hello, everyone. My name is James Battershill, and I'm the founder of Juno Food Labs, a Winnipeg-based food processing startup that focuses on making products that include new and innovative protein ingredients. I also sit as a member of the Winnipeg Food Council and the Manitoba Protein Consortium. I was happy when the minister's office called about the Protein Consortium gig because it was pretty clear that it's an initiative that's focused on the future. We're asking the question, how can Manitoba use our strategic advantages to grow and become a global leader in protein? It's kind of hard to think about the future on its own anymore, though. With everything the world has gone through in the past year, I find myself always talking about a post-COVID future. So what will the world look like after widespread vaccination efforts have wrapped up, when life returns to normal? I'm afraid I've kind of forgotten what normal was, and I'm a little doubtful that the way we do business and conduct our personal life is going to be the same as it was at the beginning of last year. And maybe that's a good thing. For today's session, I'm very pleased to introduce three people who will have a role in shaping what that new future looks like for our industry. Leon Fletcher from Cargill Protein, Dominique Baumann from Roquette, and Sheldon Scott from HyLife. I'm going to give each of the panelists 5 minutes to introduce themselves and their companies, and then we'll dive into some questions about what they expect the post-COVID-19 future to look like for our industry. Leon, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sounds great, James. And again, good morning, everybody, and good day. Leon Fletcher with Cargill, as James stated. I'm the operations lead for our North America Protein. So a very diverse portfolio of 42 facilities from Mexico to Canada. Producing eggs, poultry products, beef products, alternative protein, with approximately 28,000 stakeholders across our North America team. So pleasure to be here.
Great. Thanks, Leon. Dominique, how about you?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm Dominique Barman. I'm with Roquette. Roquette is a family-owned company headquartered in France. We are a leader in plant-based protein, where we started several years ago. And I'm in Canada here to build and start up and create plant-based protein plant here in Manitoba, in Portage, which we have started. And Roquette is a global leader in plant-based protein, but also carbohydrate. We have about 25 plants around the world and about 9,000 people. So I work with Roquette in Europe, in Asia, and in the US, and moved to Manitoba in summer 2019, finish this project.
Great. Well, we're very happy that that you're here in Manitoba working on that exciting Roquette project in Portage. Sheldon, how about you?
Thanks, James. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having us participate in the summit. My name is Shelton Saw. I'm Senior Director of Corporate Sustainability with HyLife. HyLife, we're a pork production company. We have roots here in Manitoba. We started our operations in southeastern Manitoba in Labroquerie as a primary production company, growing pigs for sale in the US and domestic markets, and have grown to a pork processing company where we have a processing plant in Neequo, Manitoba, as well as further processing in the US, as well as in Mexico. We've grown over the last number of years from fairly humble beginnings of 150 staff to now ranging just over 3,600 employees in North America. And yeah, produce products for export primarily into the Asian marketplace, but also in the US and other markets overseas.
That's great. Thanks, Sheldon. So we're going to start our path to the future by first looking back at the past for the first panel discussion question that we have today. On January 1st, 2020, we rang in the new year with no real idea of just how much dramatically our lives were going to be changed. By March 11th, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic, and restrictions on our normal activities started to be implemented shortly thereafter. I want all of our panelists to close your eyes and think back well over a year to your first day back in the office after your holiday break. If you knew then what you know now, how would you have used those first 60 days of 2020 differently to prepare your company for the disruption that COVID-19 was going to have? Sheldon, I'll start with you.
Okay. Yeah, interesting question, and yeah, looking back, a lot has happened over the last year, and definitely have had to shift and change our processes, how we manage things. I think looking back, I think we felt that HyLife produced a fairly robust, we would say, industry-leading COVID response. We felt we were fairly successful in prevention within our facility, and have continued throughout this pandemic without any disruption and prevention from us to continue our business. Though looking back, I think there were obviously things that we would have done to help prepare ourselves a little bit better for the coming challenges. And I think we would have first mobilized a COVID response team earlier on, developing a team that was accountable to our response plan and identifying our areas of risk. We would have definitely implemented mandatory masks in our different welfare areas in the initial weeks of the response. We were very responsive or reactive to the pandemic at that point in time, and were implementing and changing things as we went, and would have implemented that earlier on, knowing that its positive impact on preventing the spread of the virus. We would have implemented from day one our daily health checks, which we do today ongoing. That would have been a very preemptive response that we would have liked to have engaged on earlier on, as well as we've implemented an electronic fob contact tracing system within our plant, and that's something that we implemented later on, months into the pandemic, but would have initiated that earlier on and been a little less reactive and more proactive in being able to do it, as well as implementing a rapid testing program earlier on to mitigate our labor disruptions and disruption in our sales mix and those other challenges. And I think all that embodied, we would have also embodied a strong culture of prevention right from the get-go. I think, like I said, we're reacting to the changes in the virus, and would have looked more proactively and built that culture of prevention and educated our associates and our partners to ensure that everyone was working towards the same goal. I think we're aligned there now, but it took a lot more time, and would have tried to drive for that to occur sooner.
Thanks, Sheldon. I know it's a difficult question because so much of what your response at that time, at the beginning of 2020, would have also been dependent on what public health information was available. And I think that the entire industry was obviously in a position where we were responding to different and changing advice from public health officials. Dominique, I'm interested to know your response to that same question. Going back to the beginning of 2020, how would you have used those first couple of months to prepare for the dramatic change that was going to happen at Roquette associated with the outbreak?
So actually what's interesting for us is that we have a plant in Wuhan in China. So we have 3 plants in China, but one in Wuhan where the pandemic started. So we had a head start. Very quickly, we created a crisis team in China, and we were able to learn from what was happening in China, first in Europe, and then Canada, and North America. I mean, the pandemic came later. So we had a head start, and early March, we already had all the key implementation measures in place on our site here, because we needed to keep the site open, and we needed to keep our contractors safe. At peak, we had 1,200 workers on site, construction workers. So beginning of March, we already had temperature checks for all the workers. We had masks in place. We had sanitation in place, and all was due to the fact that China was hit first, and this happened early January. So we had a head start. Now, as the COVID and the measures were implemented by the governments, we adapted. We worked closely with the government health agencies. We had them on site almost weekly to audit what we were doing and learn from what was happening in other companies. And very quickly, through the summer, we implemented an on-site testing facility for workers, and this helped a lot. So we were benefiting from the global presence of Roquette, especially in China. Now, what could have we done differently? The project is the biggest project here in Manitoba as of today, and we got hit by some equipment deliveries because some companies, especially in Eastern Canada, had to shut down. So what we could have done, after is contact our suppliers and share faster with them what we were doing on site to prevent them to shut down, and work with their governments to keep their operation running. Because the delivery of the critical pieces of equipment were needed, and it's delayed the project.
And that really speaks to the challenge that we're facing here, is that it's no one individual company's operations that have been impacted by this. It's really been economy and global impact. So supply chains, regardless of whether or not you control them, have certainly had a dramatic impact on everybody's operations. Leon, same question to you. How would you have used the first 60 days of 2020 differently, knowing then what you know now?
Yeah, thanks, James. Great question, and very similar to Dominique, as Cargill being a global entity, we did have a little bit of a head start as well too with the impacts in Asia and Southeast Asia. So we started working through and learning immediately from our locations in China and Thailand, the Philippines. Some of those key learnings obviously were immediately with the PPE, looking at our formations and our lines and how we can do distancing where it can be applied. Obviously very tough in a protein operation. But again, looking to ways we can evaluate that, starting to procure barriers, the PPE, and again, with 28,000 stakeholders just in North America alone, that's a monumental task, but we were very fortunate as well, and again, similar to Dominique, to have that head start in January. Though no doubt still a huge undertaking. Supply is very similar too. I think about the progress we had with PPE. If I reflect back and if I had that perfect head start, even with our vast supply chain, could we have gotten the mask quicker? Could we have got the plastic and metal to build the dividers even sooner? I think time is always where we reflect back of, I believe we had a great leading execution of fighting the pandemic in our facilities, but no doubt, could you always do it sooner, quicker, faster for our stakeholders to protect them? So PPE and the raw materials that supply for the barriers and segregation points, I think is one critical thing that if we could have had a head start looking back, we would love to have that. The other one that really stood out for us that wasn't previously mentioned is transportation. Even though we had some good head starts from our teams in Asia, if you look especially across Canada and a few of our larger locations, we do have quite a bit of supplemental transportation, centralized transportation, bringing our stakeholders into our facilities. And with that was a risk. So as we saw communal outbreaks, we quickly reacted to carpooling and centralized transportation and put together a protocol there, dividers in the buses, sanitation of the buses, some rules and requirements around carpooling to help mitigate that risk. That's one that I think as we could have stood up that quicker and acknowledged that quicker, that didn't come up in our Asia locations, is one as I reflect backwards, I think would have helped us tremendously in some of our larger facilities. The other piece, as you all seen and heard, is you think about a facility that's 900,000 square feet and maybe 2,000 employees, looking at the amenities, locker rooms, cafeterias. We quickly made some adjustments there and made significant capital investments in some of our larger facilities to get greater spacing. So again, if you think about capital projects prior to the pandemic, could we have done that prior? That would have been a huge help. As you can imagine, in the midst of unprecedented times, trying to build a cafeteria and change that along with locker rooms was a tough task. So that's my thoughts for if we had that perfect world and head start by 2 months.
Oh, definitely. It's interesting that the response for all three of you is very much driven by the fact that you're global operations and that none of this is happening in isolation in any one local region. And that's actually sort of leads into my next question. Throughout the pandemic, people have increased their focus on local food. The absence of grocery store staples on store shelves have scared people somewhat. And we know that this spurred on a resurgence of victory gardens at home over the summertime and a higher demand for buying at local markets and asking retailers to stock more local products. This said, we do know that the robust international supply chains really proved their resilience during the pandemic. For example, we know that there was the reality that the Canadian food processing plant shutdowns meant that McDonald's had to source a portion of its beef from non-Canadian sources for the very first time since 2003. And while we know that that situation wasn't ideal, at the end of the day, people could still get their Big Macs while we were seeing a scale of disruption that is unheard of. So I'm interested to know, the three of you all operating global companies with global supply chains, how will your company respond to the competing demands from consumers for more local food products, but also the need for a diverse, stable food supply chain? Dominique, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I'm going to respond specifically to Canada. One of the reasons we're in Manitoba is because our raw material is peas, and we located the plant because we're close to the pea production. So we are really getting close to the local producers, and this was very important. Another big thing is also, proximity of water and energy. So being close, being in Manitoba, where water is in plenty of supply, and also hydroelectricity is the majority of the electricity produced in Manitoba, makes us more sustainable. So being close to the raw material is definitely a strategic choice, and we're doing this in all our plants. It's important to be close to the raw material, so to reduce the transportation. Now, we are making the plant-based protein here, the pea protein in Portage, but we need to ship outside Canada also. And Manitoba is in a unique position because it's in the center of Canada, and we have good connectivity from air, rail, and road. And this gives us flexibility in shipping options, rail, going east and also west through Vancouver, going to Asia, and also road connections and a rail connection going south to the US, which is our biggest market in North America. So this is how we responded. You're right, the supply chain infrastructure has responded very well. So this allowed us to supply not only our food customer, but one of our core business is also supplying excipient to the pharma industry. And pharma industry was under a lot of stress to receive all the raw materials they needed to keep all the world safe. So we were able to supply our customers with all the excipients and ingredients they needed, especially the pharma industry. So supply chain responded very well. And the fact that we have plants all around the world with the same standards helped us a lot in this pandemic.
Thanks, Dominique. Same question to you, Leon. I know that sort of local production is definitely something that Cargill has prided itself on. And I assume that there's some pretty important lessons that have been taught both about the consumer and your operations in this space over the last year.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I'll stick as well, similar to our Canadian footprint. Obviously, a great example with the McDonald's and Big Mac call out, and especially that first wave of the pandemic. But I mean, obviously, we continue to work every day with our farmers and employees to keep our food system running through these unprecedented times. So we recognize our farmers and ranchers rely on the global food system to earn their livelihoods. So it's critical for us to keep our markets moving and supply chain moving forward. We learned a ton about how nimble we can be and the diversity of our footprint. If you look at our supply chain and actually how quick we really responded, obviously there's some impacts to your point in your question of impact to Canadian sourced for our McDonald's business, and obviously supplemented from the US. So we did have flexibility there, but even through that, there was other micro discussions when you look at the retail demand shift away from food services, restaurants slowed due to social distancing and mandates. That was one place I think we're really proud as we partnered with customers like Cisco and working through an increased case-ready distribution on some finished product formats that we didn't have in our facilities, especially in the poultry space in Ontario. So we worked through sending off raw materials packaged by Cisco operations, then back to us to go out through commerce and retail. We also have a facility supplies McDonald's in the poultry space in London, Ontario. And that facility, I would say, was probably the most nimble early on. As we saw some outbreaks in Alberta, we were fairly stable in Ontario in our facilities and the communities in which we serve. And so one of the things we did that really proud of to help support many of our retailers and obviously consumers of protein across Canada was make some significant changes in our debone operations in the poultry facility to start making breast meat and tender cuts that we wouldn't typically do to help supplement some of the retailers. And so we shipped some of that product to our Watson Guelph facility there in Ontario for tray pack parts and helped balance that retail demand. So you look through that, really proud of our supply chain and the way we can maneuver across Canada. And obviously we had a supplement from US, but I think if you look at, I'm going to call it the wave 2 of the pandemic, post-Christmas holiday that's started to rear itself in some of the provinces. I think we've seen some of that stability as we work through some challenges in the Guelph, Ontario area, and then back even over to Alberta currently. I think we've mitigated some of those risks that we saw in wave 1 as we learned how quick to react our supply chain. So again, really fortunate to have our diverse supply chain within Canada and being able to quickly react to support not only our current customer base in a variety of ways, but also to adapt for some of our other customers that we didn't have, especially in the retail case ready sector as the retail demand spiked early on. Great,
thanks, Leon. Sheldon, I'll pose the question a little bit differently to you, actually. Obviously, you mentioned that HyLife's an important supplier of pork products to the Canadian market, but I know that operations in Asia and sales in Asia have always been a priority for HyLife. So that is a market that clearly values the quality and product that's coming out of Canadian production facilities. Did you see that same response from consumers in those markets, a preference and a shifting preference towards local production, or were they simply happy that you were able to continue to sustain and provide sort of the same high quality products that you'd been historically?
That's a good question. And yeah, we're a Canadian company, but yeah, we are very export driven. So that is our primary focus is our export markets. And yeah, we did not experience that shift in consumer preference on the domestic side. And but we do feel those pressures in our export markets, and that's a continuous pressure when into the areas our primary marketplace in Japan is there is a priority placed on and a premium placed on locally grown products there. So we feel those pressures on an ongoing basis, and that's a consistent thing for us. So I think how we've responded is maintaining consistency of supply. I think that's critical. When the others, Dominique and Liam, spoke about it, maintaining our supply chain and ensuring that consistency of product coming through and that we can meet our orders, meet them on time, and meet them at the quality spec that we've been known for, and as well as maintaining ourselves as the highest quality alternative to domestic product in our Japanese marketplace. So that's focusing on our taste and trust traits, which we have put a lot of time, effort, and research towards ensuring that we can maintain that. Yeah, so I think our primary focus is to keep doing what we're doing, and as far as pressures that we felt, I don't think it's changing to a very considerable extent in that marketplace. I mean, it's maintained, and actually the demand for product was quite strong throughout the pandemic and actually improved over a period of time with impacts to different supply chains throughout the world. As long as you could maintain your product mix and your quality measures and maintain your supply chains, there was good opportunity to continue selling into those different Asian markets.
So it sounds like the reality was that consumers wanted stable supply chains and consistent product availability, and it didn't matter to you whether or not, or it didn't matter to them whether or not you were doing that as a local producer, as an export-oriented one that was still able to fulfill those requirements.
Well, and I'll make an add-on. There is always a preference in those markets where we're selling our product to preference to domestic supply. And I think it's ourselves trying to differentiate ourselves as a next best alternative has always been our goal, and we've been able to maintain that. But with some impacts on local supply, there were some opportunities for us in that regard.
No, that's interesting. Moving on to our third question. So COVID-19 introduced the world to this concept of the essential worker. There was all sorts of media stories on this throughout the last year. The people in the front lines of our economy whose work is required for our immediate survival. We know that many of these essential workers are employed in our food system. They include farmers, farm workers, processing plant employees, line cooks, grocery store staff. So we also know that while our food system has very tight margins, the consumers are always demanding lower costs and lower prices. There has been a lot of media coverage about these workers being some of the lowest paid in our economy. Is that divergence between the social and the economic value of workers in our food system a problem? And if so, what can we do as an industry to help resolve it? And is there a role for consumers, retailers, and government to play there? Leon, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks, James. Great question. I think about the center of our values at Cargill. Putting people first is always one of our call-outs. So, really never carried more weight in meaning amidst the COVID and the pandemic environment. Definitely took on a new meaning as we worked through and navigated those waters. Obviously, we cannot deliver our protein to tables without the people in the front lines and all the way down from farm to fork in our supply chain. And we really look at our stakeholders and essential workers as the heroes of our team, and looked at that before the pandemic and even more today as we work through these unprecedented times. So the way we approach, because there is disparity from time to time, and if you look at economic circumstances, whether in the States or Canada, we have a pretty robust process of evaluating our local economies, wage surveys, 2, 3, 4 times a year within the facilities for our stakeholders, just to make sure we're really competitive in that environment. We also keep in front of us, and this is a global execution, things like consumer price indexes to ensure we're balancing inflation and demand and those household goods and products that our stakeholders are necessities. So that's an approach we look at too as well. And we're also really fortunate at Cargill, and I'm sure the rest of the panel is as well, if their companies, to have a great benefit package for stakeholders, retirement options, and in most of our facilities, some great incentive plans to reward our teams for their high performance. So I would say, obviously, we looked in a different light through the pandemic as economic uncertainty shifted. But as far as how we approach and work to be as competitive as possible with wages, I don't think changed. I think we actually got quicker, better, and more nimble with it is probably the way I would look at it for Cargill.
Thanks, Leon. Sheldon, what about you?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm going to echo some of the stuff that Leon mentioned. That I think one of our core values is taking care of our employees and our communities and our customers, and I think it's important that employees are up there on the top, and we look at those people as and like Leon mentioned, the unsung heroes in this, where every day throughout this pandemic, through these uncertain times and these different challenges, they got up and they did what we felt was a necessary job, keeping animals alive and feeding people, which is critically important, especially during these unprecedented times. And for HyLife, we feel that competitive wages are kind of the cornerstone behind our ongoing success within this industry. It's hard for me to comment outside of ourselves and other industries, but we do pride ourselves in ensuring that we're competitive, and we do that through engaging employee wage surveys, benefit surveys on an ongoing basis for all the positions through our company to ensure that we are in fact competitive and on the top end of the wage scale. That's been a critical tool for us on an ongoing basis, as well as we have a union environment in some of our facilities, and it's having an ongoing strong relationship with our union. We negotiate all levels of compensation with them, and feel strongly that we maintain a leadership role in the wages side of our industry. So yeah, those are just some of the tools that we employ. And I think it's about continuing to be proactive in ensuring that our employees are taken care of, whether it be through wages, bonus incentive programs, or other key benefits to ensure that they're taken care of.
Thanks. Dominique, same question to you.
Yes, I'm going to somewhat reiterate what Leon and Sheldon have mentioned. You know, at Roquette, one of our core values is well-being for our people and our customers. And obviously, when you have such a core value and you walk the talk, we provide fair wages and health benefits, and this is a given. And I think this should be the case for the food industry. If we want to have satisfied customers, we want employees who goes the extra mile to do whatever they can to provide the best service and product to the customers. And without taking care of our employees, there's no way they're gonna take the extra, they're gonna go the extra mile and be engaged. So this is very this is a given, I think, and this is what the industry in general should do. Want to come back also to safety, because you know the pandemic, protecting our workers is part of safety, and safety for me is about taking care of each other. And very quickly, even if it's not popular, I can tell you when we imposed the masks early March on the construction site, we had to fight. It was really because we're not mandated by the government. We actually get masks shipped from France, because it was not easy to find masks in Canada, and it was a struggle, and it took us a lot of communication explaining why this is the right thing to do to protect themselves and protect the family. So safety is not a word, you know, it's a way of living. So this is something the food industry could do, and safety is about taking care of each other. I'm expecting, you know, when I'm in the plant and if I do something stupid, I forgot to wear my safety glasses, I expect someone to stop me and tell me, "Hey, Dominique, you forgot your glasses," and they do this because they care about me, and they care about my own safety. So I think two things. Again, you know, we need to provide fair wages and health benefits for all the workers, and also take care of themselves, take care of ourselves from a safety standpoint.
No, definitely that safety element and the other benefits that you provide to your workers are obviously something that comes into play when evaluating the quality of a work environment. So, and good that you have sort of shared accountability on your team, that people aren't afraid to speak up to you when you're touring through a space, because you know that if they're willing to stand up to you and say that same thing, then certainly the core operations staff are going to be held accountable to each other as well. So the next question that I have for all three of you is a little bit bigger picture, and maybe doesn't necessarily speak to your individual operations, but certainly I wanted you to draw on your own experience. So COVID-19 has mobilized an unprecedented response across the world, including cooperation between private citizens, industry, and government towards a common goal. Post-COVID, what needs to happen to launch the same kind of response to the threats associated with climate change? Sheldon, why don't we start with you?
Great question, a difficult question. Yeah, it's interesting. It's with climate change being an imminent threat to the globe today. It's not quite the same as the pandemic. I mean, it's a growing threat. It's ongoing, and it's growing over time, and it's something that needs to be addressed. But I don't believe that the same kind of response can be triggered as was with COVID unless we have some government-driven incentive programs. I think it's critically important. I mean, the whole purpose of business is to create jobs and to build the economy and make money. And I think we have to be placed on a even playing field with our competitors. And in this global marketplace, we're competing with different areas of the world, and those competitive forces need to be equalized. And I think from a government's perspective, they have to understand that and maintain Canadian competitiveness, but allowing us to address climate change as it approaches. So I think that driving force has to be from government, and has to be done through creative incentive programs to ensure that businesses can undertake reducing their carbon footprint and improving the situation as it pertains to climate change, while still remaining competitive and keeping our place as leaders in the protein industry in the world.
Definitely. Leon, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's obviously it's a big solve. It is different, to Sheldon's point, from the pandemic, but this is a place where we're really proud of some of the accelerators we've seen at Cargill. And this is global, and I'll speak to the protein environment in my operations. Is prior to the pandemic, we launched our Beef Up Sustainability Program, and that commitment is achieving a 30% greenhouse gas intensity reduction in North America and our beef supply chain by 2030. So that already started to get off the ground and moving forward in velocity, and then obviously continued to move through the pandemic, which again, it did not slow us down, did not slow our actions, deliverables to meet that 2030 milestone. Another one that was right in the middle of the pandemic, so I think about the nimbleness, and we'll talk about that later on, and swiftness to action, is the 10 by 20 by 30 food waste initiative that we've partnered with a few of our customer partners in the retail space. And this is in alignment with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, the target 12.3. And it's a lofty goal from a food waste lens, looking at 50% reduction of food loss and waste by 2030. I think we kicked this partnership off probably June, July, in the middle of the pandemic. So to see the velocity continue, because I agree with you, we have to push this initiative. And I think at Cargill, we showed that with our Beef Up Sustainability, moving into the 10 by 20 by 30. And even on the legs of the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef program that we've been a huge part of. And that started around November too. So, very fortunate that we have a very driven focus from our headquarters in Minneapolis at a global front, and even within our North America protein operations, it's something that we've really continued to push and accelerate. But it wouldn't be without our customer partners, our vendor partners, our suppliers to enable this piece. And again, I think this is a broad spectrum, not just a Cargill, not just our customers. It is going to take a broad group of private sector, along with the government support, to Sheldon's point, to be where we need to be to meet these lofty goals. So again, great question, and really proud of where we're at with several initiatives at Cargill.
Yeah, certainly it sounds like it's something that everyone, not only involved in this protein industry, but the broader economy and government operations, needs to be moving in the same direction. Dominique, we often hear about part of the selection process behind why Roquette selected Manitoba as a location for your new facility. Often comes up is the renewable hydroelectric power source that was going to be supplied, and the availability of fresh water and processing. So I'm interested to know, Roquette obviously has been focused on climate change and environmental performance for a long time. What are your thoughts on this question? How can we mobilize a response of this, maybe not the same scale as Sheldon and Leon have said, just by nature of the threat, but how can we mobilize an effective response to climate change as an industry?
I think what happened during the COVID is a good example, and I want to take it to another example, which was led by Manitoba, and I was part of an initiative called Sustainable Protein for Manitoba, and this is an initiative that has been started by last year, and it involves government, universities, non-profit and private organizations like us, like Roquette, and volunteered several days to develop a roadmap, which was presented a few weeks ago. And I think that was a very good response, and from all the stakeholders and people where sustainable protein can thrive. I think Manitoba and Canada in general has a fantastic opportunity to be a world leader and in production of proteins, not only plant-based protein, but also all kinds of proteins. And at the end, talking to other people on the team who were developing the roadmap, it's clear that we can develop a circular economy where our byproducts, from making protein from peas, can be sold, recovered, recycled to animal feed, and then the byproduct from animal feed production can be recycled also. So there is a lot of opportunity to make improvement, and all these initiatives, circular economy, are going to improve the climate. So people are ready. I think COVID created the urgency, which unfortunately the climate change is a long-term, has a long-term effect. So it's not immediate like the COVID, but I think all stakeholders will respond. And it was really very nice to see how people put their head together, and the roadmap is really fantastic and brings an opportunity for Manitoba. So so these are this kind of initiatives we need to develop and lead as a private organization, but also the government have had a good role, a great role to take in facilitating these initiatives. And that's something which is happening in Manitoba. Now we need now to implement this roadmap, but I think it's possible here.
Oh, definitely. I think that for me, the biggest thing is to ensure that all of the lessons that we've learned about the value of taking preventative measures early, that we're able to extend that mindset to the issue of climate change. We're almost out of time for the session today, but I do have one last question. I'm just going to ask you to keep your responses nice and short to less than a minute. But I couldn't finish this session off without asking you to gaze into your crystal ball and try and predict the future a little bit. So again, I want you to close your eyes. It's January 2022. Your first day back in the office again after a nice holiday break, or maybe you're working remotely now from some beach resort somewhere. We don't know exactly the way your work arrangements are going to be structured. But to you, what is the single biggest difference in how your company does business in January 2022 compared to January 2020? Dominique, why don't we start with you?
Well, the big difference, I mean, personally, I'm going to take it personally. I moved to Manitoba in 2019, and I've not seen my kids for a long time. Last time I traveled to the US, there in the US, was Christmas 2019. Gonna be a grandpa in a few weeks, actually. And I won't unfortunately be able to go and visit the kids in the US. So hopefully I will be able to do this during the holidays at the end of the year. Now, what has changed? I think the big difference is that we learned how to work remotely. We were somewhat reluctant to jump into the pool and work remotely. Working from home was we didn't have the tools, and I'm very proud of our IT team who implemented the Teams and new ways of communicating within a few weeks. This was done. So I think we need to keep some remote working tools and lessons from the COVID. And but this will also, the COVID crisis being behind us, will allow us to go back and be together in the office, because working from home 100% of the time is really difficult for all the teams, and it's difficult to onboard people 100% remotely. We are building a team here in Portage. A year ago, we are 30 people. We're close to 120 people now. So onboarding so many people, training, and doing this a lot remotely is a challenge. So I think the big differences will be learning from the COVID and being able to work remotely and work globally as teams remotely more efficiently.
Definitely. So when we invite you to the Protein Summit next year, you may be taking the session from a cafe in Nice. We'll be eager to see where you're situated then. Leon, how about you? The beginning of next year, what is the biggest difference over that 2-year period in terms of how you're conducting business, or sort of for your own sort of ability to do your job?
I love Dominique's call out with the family piece first. You think about our stakeholders, it pains us to work virtual to that exact point and not be in our facilities as frequent as we would be. And obviously, even just from simple recognition and safety milestones and giving a thanks to our stakeholders over the last year has just been tough. We are fortunate we've been able to get out and about limitedly. However, that's tough in a people-ran business that we are in the protein business. So I love that family call out. It's no different than internal family for Cargill, as well as our own personal families that we definitely miss. It's virtual, has its place. I don't think it's placed every day in our lives, but definitely has worked. And it's been something that I think we've all been nimble with. From a broader Cargill perspective within our protein organization, I really think it's really is our swiftness to action and being nimble that's changed us, and I think will continue. It's a place where we reflect quite frequently on a global scale. As a big organization in roughly 70 countries, 160,000 people globally, we're slow at times. And I think the pandemic helped us become quicker to react towards our stakeholder needs, our customers' needs, the consumers' needs, and really to balance the global economy at scale. So I think if you straw polled Cargill and leaders in Cargill, you'd hear that come up the most. I don't think a year ago we would say we were swift to action. I think we had a lot of red tape and to make a decision, the decision was passed to where we needed to be. So I think that's the place where I see our locations, my facilities, our leadership, where I look forward to seeing that continue post-pandemic, because it's been a huge win for us at Cargill.
Oh, that's a great answer. Sheldon, last word to you on the same question.
And I'll reiterate what Leon and Dominique had just said about family and connectivity with the associates. And I think that's critically important. We are a people-driven business, and people drive our business and our success. And yeah, we miss those connectivities and those connections with them. And though we've shifted to a remote work situation and utilizing technology, I think there is a desire to get back to that personal touch. However, I mean, we are going to maintain. I think we've learned that there are things that don't require your in-person attention, and we're gonna utilize technology on a more consistent basis ongoing, realizing its value and realizing its value to the bottom line, and as opposed to flying halfway across the world for a meeting. I mean, we've come to be able to manage it from this perspective, utilizing technology. I think that's going to persist for a number of different circumstances. Probably, though, I think the one biggest thing for us is through the pandemic, there was a very dramatic shift in mindset towards a focus of our employees' health and welfare, and how that relates to the overall health and welfare and success of our company. I think through this program, we've adopted some really strong programs, ensuring that our employees stayed healthy and safe, and putting protections in place to ensure that they can continue feeling secure in their job and that environment, while still being able to go out and have meaningful employment and do their job. So understanding that overwhelming impact of our employees' health and welfare and our continued success, I think that's driven the implementation of a lot of different things for us. I mean, I think
we're going to continue with the employee health checks and continue with a renewed focus on our employees' health and welfare, not just physical, but their mental health and welfare as it pertains to their success and their ongoing successes within our company. And as well, we've developed some new employee resource groups specifically focused on different parts of our company and different sectors to help support our employees through this challenge and beyond. So I think it's helped us grow and renew our employee first focus within our company.
That's a great place to end the conversation today, I think. I really appreciated all three of you joining us for today's session. Absolutely wonderful to get your feedback from a diverse group of people that are all working within the same industry, but all with global operations that have obviously been impacted fairly dramatically by COVID-19. And it does sound like all of your businesses are taking steps not only to improve operations and use the pandemic as a learning opportunity and opportunity to accelerate growth into the future. So again, very thankful that you're able to join us today. When hopefully we'll be able to see you in person at next year's Protein Summit, maybe with the exception of Dominique, or maybe we can all join him in the south of France and take our remote call shared. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.